The air in the Las Vegas Hilton suite was thick with a buzz that had nothing to do with the desert heat or the hum of the air conditioning. It was the electricity of mischief, a feeling that often followed Elvis Presley wherever he went, especially when his closest friends, the Memphis Mafia, were around. Tonight that buzz was particularly strong, vibrating around Elvis as he paced his lavish living room, a grin splitting his face. "All right, boys, listen up," Elvis declared, his voice a low rumble tinged with a playful excitement. He was leaning against a plush velvet armchair, dressed in a silk robe, his hair slightly disheveled from an afternoon nap. Operation Green Jumpers is a go. Red West, his lifelong friend and bodyguard, looked up from the poker game he was losing to Joe Esposito. Red, with his strong build and steady eyes, was usually the voice of reason, the grounded presence in Elvis's whirlwind life. But even Red couldn't resist a good prank, especially when Elvis was leading the charge. "Green Jumpers. What in the world are you cooking up now?" Elvis's grin widened, revealing a flash of white teeth. "Remember how Red switched out my pomade for hair gel last week? My hair felt like a concrete slab. Red, a concrete slab." He exaggerated, rubbing his hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, which to anyone else looked just fine. Red chuckled, remembering the look on Elvis's face that morning. It was just for a laugh. Besides, you looked just as handsome and stiff as a board," Elvis retorted good-naturedly. "Well, payback, my friend, is a dish best served amphibious." Joe Esposito, Elvis's closest confidant and road manager, raised an eyebrow. "Amphibious, Elvis? What are you talking about?" From behind a screen, one of Elvis's assistants, Billy, emerged, carrying a large, rather lumpy canvas bag. A faint sporadic rippet could be heard from within. Red's eyes widened. "No way, you didn't." Elvis strode over, taking the bag from Billy with the flourish of a magician. He unzipped it just enough for a peek. Inside, a dozen pairs of beady, unblinking eyes stared back. Small green bodies shifted against each other. Frogs. Live frogs. "Oh, I did, Red. And they're perfectly healthy, mind you," Elvis said, as if that made the prank more palatable. "Got 'em from a reputable supplier. Said they'd been well fed, and they're all good jumpers, apparently," he winked. Red West slowly pushed away from the poker table, a mixture of dread and grudging admiration spreading across his face. He knew Elvis's pranks. They were often elaborate, sometimes messy, but always came from a place of pure, unadulterated fun, and always aimed at the people he loved most. "You're going to put frogs in my room, aren't you?" Red asked. Though it wasn't really a question. "Not just in your room, Red," Elvis corrected, his voice a low, conspiring whisper. "Everywhere. In your shoes, under your pillow, maybe even in your coffee cup. If I'm feeling chaos." Joe Esposito laughed, a hearty booming sound. "Elvis, you're crazy. Red's gonna kill you." "Nah." Elvis scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Red loves me. Besides, it's just a little bit of nature, brought right to his doorstep. He needs to commune with the wild more often away from these stale hotel rooms." The plan began to unfold. Elvis, with the focus of a general planning a military campaign, briefed his inner circle. They would wait until Red had gone to dinner with some other friends, ensuring he'd be out of his suite for a good hour or two. Then, under the cover of darkness, or at least the dimmed hallway lights of the hotel, they would strike. Elvis personally selected each frog, inspecting them with the gravity of a diamond dealer. "This one looks like a good sprinter," he'd murmur, placing it gently into a smaller, more manageable container. "This one a bit plump, probably a good hider." Red, oblivious, enjoyed his steak and mashed potatoes downstairs, occasionally thinking about the poker game and his recent loss. He had no idea that a small, slimy amphibian army was preparing for an invasion of his personal space. Back in Elvis's suite, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Elvis was like a kid on Christmas Eve, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet, pulled on a pair of rubber gloves, giggling as he did so. "Can't risk getting any frog slime on my lucky ring now, can I?" Finally, the call came. Red was on his way back up. It was time. Elvis, Joe, and Dilly moved quickly down the corridor, the canvas bag emitting a symphony of croaks. The hallway was empty, save for a passing maid who paid him no mind, probably used to the strange goings-on around Elvis's entourage. They had a master key to Red's room, a perk of being part of the inner circle. With a soft click, the door to Red's suite swung open. Quick flick of the light switch illuminated a typical hotel room, neat, orderly, completely unaware of the delightful chaos about to descend upon it. "All right, gentlemen," Elvis whispered, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Let's make some memories." And with that, the first frog was carefully placed on Red's pillow, then another tucked into a shoe, a third perhaps near the toothbrush. Elvis moved with a joyful precision, like a mischievous artist adding strokes to his masterpiece. The room would soon be alive with green hopping surprises, all thanks to the king of rock and roll and his latest most ridiculous prank. The stage was set for Red's unforgettable welcome home. The soft click of the hotel room door was the only sound, as Red West stepped inside his suite, oblivious to the miniature, cold-blooded army lurking within. He'd had a good dinner, a decent laugh, and now all he wanted was to kick off his shoes, maybe watch a late-night movie, and drift off to sleep. He tossed his room key onto the small table by the door and reached for the light switch. The overhead lights flickered to life, bathing the room in a bright, sudden glow, and that's when he saw it, a small, green blob on his pillow. It sat there perfectly still, its throat pulsing rhythmically. Red blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. It was definitely a frog. The very real, very green, very much alive frog. Just as he did, the frog, perhaps sensing his presence, took a mighty leap. It landed squarely on his bedside lamp, clinging there for a moment before dropping to the floor with a soft, wet plop. Red froze. His eyes, now wide awake, began to scan the room. That's when he noticed another one peeking out from under the curtain, and another sitting placidly on the edge of the coffee table, and then a series of distinct, echoing ribbits from various corners of the room. His shoes! He'd left his loafers right by the door. He peered into one. Two beady eyes stared back, followed by a frantic wriggle as a frog tried to escape its leather prison. "Elvis me!" Red's roar reverberated through the luxurious suite, shaking the very walls. It wasn't a roar of pure anger, not yet, but one of disbelief, frustration, and a healthy dose of impending chaos. The frogs, startled by the sudden eruption of noise, seemed to have taken it as their cue. The room instantly transformed into a hopping, croaking, slippery battlefield. Frogs leaped from the bed to the dresser, from the dresser to the floor, some bouncing off the walls, others disappearing under furniture. Red jumped back, narrowly avoiding a particularly ambitious jumper that landed near his bare foot. He started pacing, hands on his hips, watching the green invaders with a mixture of horrified fascination and utter bewilderment. He couldn't even be mad yet. The sheer audacity of it was almost impressive. "Elvis, you are so getting it for this," he yelled, though he knew Elvis was probably still in his own suite, just a few doors down. Likely, laughing himself silly, he grabbed the phone and dialed Elvis's room. It rang twice before Elvis's voice, thick with suppressed laughter, answered. "Well, hello there, Red. Did you have a nice evening?" "Nice evening," Red bellowed into the phone, trying to swat a frog that had just landed on his shoulder. "My room is infested. It's like a swamp in here, you lunatic frogs, everywhere." Elvis's laughter, no longer suppressed, erupted into a full-blown, joyous roar. Red could practically hear him slapping his knee. "They're just saying hello, Red. Just being friendly. Don't they remind you of home back in the bayou?" "We're from Memphis, Elvis, not the bayou," Red corrected, exasperated. he watched a frog hop into his open suitcase. Oh, for crying out loud, my clean shirts. Just consider it. An early morning wake-up call from nature. Elvis chuckled, clearly having the time of his life. You're welcome, by the way. I hand-picked each one, Red groaned. You hand-picked Elvis. How am I supposed to sleep? How am I supposed to even walk in here without stepping on one of your friends? They're very agile, Red. I'm sure you'll manage, Elvis said, and Red could practically feel the smirk through the phone. Just give 'em a little talking to. Maybe they'll sing you to sleep. Red hung up the phone abruptly. Not wanting to give Elvis any more satisfaction, he surveyed the chaotic scene. Frobs were now actively exploring every nook and cranny. One was trying to scale the curtains, leaving a faint, damp trail. Another had found its way into the bathroom, its croaks echoing strangely off the tiled walls. The immediate problem, getting them out. He couldn't just leave them. The hotel would have a fit, and frankly, he wasn't a fan of sharing his bed with amphibians. He remembered a plastic wastebasket by the desk. He grabbed it, then found a thick magazine. The arduous task of frog wrangling began. It was a messy, slippery, and surprisingly difficult endeavor. The frogs were fast, surprisingly good at hiding, and seemed to delight in hopping in the opposite direction of where Red intended them to go. He'd gently nudge one with the magazine, and it would perform an Olympic-level leap over the wastebasket. He'd corner another only for it to squirt out from under the magazine, leaving a slimy residue, sweat beaded on his forehead. His initial anger was slowly giving way to a grudging amusement. Elvis truly was a master prankster. This wasn't malicious. It was just Elvis. And it was hilariously inconvenient. After what felt like an hour of chasing, scooping, and careful depositing, Red had managed to collect most of the frogs into the wastebasket. Carried the plastic container carefully, making sure the lid was secure, and headed out into the hallway. He knocked on Elvis's door, hard. It opened a crack, revealing Elvis's grinning face, clearly expecting a reaction. His eyes landed on the wastebasket in Red's hands, and his smile faltered just a little. Red, you didn't hurt them, did you? Elvis asked, a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes. Of course not, you big baby, Red retorted, pushing the door open fully. Your little friends are ready for their grand exit. And guess what? You're walking them out. Elvis looked at the basket, then back at Red. He burst out laughing again, a hearty, infectious laugh that filled the hallway. All right, fair enough. You got me there, Red. Together, they walked the frogs to a discreet patch of bushes outside the hotel, releasing them into the night, the chorus of croaks fading into the desert air. Red looked at Elvis, who was still chuckling. Then a slow smile spread across his own face. You know, Red said, shaking his head. That was quite a stunt. But just so you know, payback is coming, and it's going to be even funnier. Elvis merely grinned. Oh, I'm counting on it, Red. I'm absolutely counting on it. The next morning, Red West's suite was back to normal, scrubbed clean of any lingering froggy evidence thanks to a very understanding and discreet hotel cleaning crew. Red, however, was still buzzing with the after effects of the amphibious invasion. He sat at his breakfast table, nursing a cup of coffee, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. The initial shock and annoyance had worn off, replaced by a fierce yet good-natured determination. Elvis had pulled off a classic. It was ridiculous, unexpected, and utterly unforgettable. Not for a moment did he consider getting genuinely angry. Their friendship wasn't built on that. It was built on trust, loyalty, and a shared love for practical jokes. But the revenge had to be perfect. It had to be even funnier, as he'd promised. Later that day, when he was sure Elvis was tied up with a photo shoot, Red convened a small informal meeting in his room. Joe, Esposito Lamar Fike, another large jovial member of the Memphis Mafia, and Sonny West, Red's cousin, were present. They were the usual co-conspirators, the trusted inner circle, for any prank, serious or otherwise. "All right, gentlemen," Red began, mimicking Elvis's conspiratorial tone from the night before. "We need ideas, big ideas. Ideas that will make Elvis's frog prank look like child's play." Lamar, known for his booming laugh and equally booming appetite, was the first to speak, a half-eaten Danish in his hand. "We could fill his room with something. Maybe chickens. Or a goat." Red shook his head. "Too similar. He'd expect it, plus live animals are a pain to clean up, believe me." He shuddered at the memory of slippery frogs. "And they gotta be returned safely. We need something unexpected." Sonny, who was usually quiet but observant, offered, "What about his clothes? Replace all his stage outfits with something ridiculous for a show." "Too mean," Joe interjected, always protective of Elvis's image. "And it would mess with the show. We can't do anything that impacts his performance or makes him look genuinely bad. It has to be funny, not humiliating." Red nodded. "Exactly. It has to be funny for him too, eventually. Something harmless but completely over the top." "What does Elvis love?" Joe mused aloud. "Besides peanut butter and banana sandwiches. And Cadillacs," Lamar added. "Or replace his microphone with a kazoo during a rehearsal." Sonny suggested, a mischievous glint in his eye. Red considered these, but none of them felt quite right. Car idea was good, but logistically difficult in a hotel garage. The kazoo was funny, but fleeting. The revenge needed to be something that had a lasting impact, a visual punchline that continued to deliver. "Think about what Elvis would find funny," Red prompted. "He loves to laugh. He loves surprises. And he loves things that are a bit extravagant." They brainstormed for a while longer, throwing out wild ideas. Filling his room with popcorn, turning his suite into a giant ball pit, replacing all his furniture with miniature versions. Each idea was debated, weighed against the criteria of funny, harmless, and memorable. Then, a thought began to slowly form in Red's mind. It started with the image of a soft, cuddly toy. Elvis, for all his swagger and superstar persona, had a surprisingly soft spot for stuffed animals. He often received them as gifts from fans, and he never threw them away. Sometimes he'd even cuddle with one while watching TV in his room. Something only his closest friends knew. Red leaned forward, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You know how Elvis is always saying he needs to be more comfortable on the road." The others looked at him, intrigued. "He complains about the sterile hotel rooms, right? Says they lack a personal touch," Red continued, warming to his idea. "Well, I'm going to make his room the most personal and comfortable room he's ever seen." Joe raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Think about it," Red said, his voice lowering conspiratorially. "Frogs are cold, slimy, a bit chaotic. What's the opposite of that? What's soft, warm, and brings a sense of overwhelming comfort?" Lamar's eyes lit up. "Teddy bears?" "Not just teddy bears," Red corrected, a grand vision forming in his mind. "Every kind of stuffed animal, bears, bunnies, lions, tigers, even little stuffed Elvis dolls if we can find them. We're going to fill his room with them, every surface from floor to ceiling." A silence fell. Then a slow grin stretched across Joe's face. "You mean completely cover his suite in stuffed animals?" "Completely," Red confirmed, his smile now a full-blown triumphant grin. "Imagine him walking in after a long day. He's expecting some peace and quiet, maybe a nice clean bed, and instead he walks into a fluffy, cuddly, overwhelming sea of plush toys." Lamar roared with laughter. "That's brilliant, Red. Absolutely brilliant. He won't know whether to scream or hug them all." Sonny was already nodding, a plan forming in his head. "It's harmless. It's funny. And it's completely unexpected. He'll think it's some kind of fan tribute gone wrong at first." "Exactly," Red exclaimed. "And it'll be a nightmare to clear out. He'll have to wade through a sea of fluff just to get to his bed. He'll be surrounded by them. Joe, the pragmatist pointed out. But where are we going to get enough stuffed animals to fill a whole suite? Red, this isn't a small operation. Red leaned back, a satisfied look on his face. That, my friends, is where the fun begins. We've got a few days until our next travel day. Plenty of souvenir shops in Vegas, and a few discreet calls to some enthusiastic fans. Might not hurt either. He knew Elvis's fans were incredibly generous. A special request from Red might just get them to part with their treasured plushies. The plan was audacious, slightly crazy, and perfectly aligned with their brand of mischievous fun. It was the antithesis of the cold, slimy frogs, and that was its true genius. It was a prank designed to overwhelm with softness and cuteness rather than surprise and disgust. Consider it. Operation Cuddle Chaos, Red declared, raising his coffee cup in a toast. Elvis Presley is about to be smothered with love. With the Operation Cuddle Chaos plan firmly in place, Red West felt a renewed sense of purpose. The idea of Elvis, the king of rock and roll, wading through a sea of stuffed animals was just too good to pass up. It was the perfect counter-prank, harmless, visually hilarious, and completely unexpected. The challenge, as Joe had pointed out, was the sheer volume. A hotel suite, even a standard one, was a large space. To truly fill it as Red envisioned would require hundreds, possibly thousands of plush toys. This wasn't a job for a quick trip to the nearest gift shop. This was a logistical puzzle worthy of a military operation. Red decided to start small but think big. His first stop was the hotel gift shop itself. He walked in trying to look casual and immediately gravitated toward the souvenir section. Sure enough, there was a small display of teddy bears, a few lions, and some novelty Elvis dolls. He bought a handful, explaining to the cashier with a straight face that he was starting a collection for his niece. The cashier, used to the eccentricities of Vegas guests, merely smiled. He then ventured out into the bustling Las Vegas Strip. He visited every souvenir shop, every novelty store, every arcade, with a prize counter that had a decent selection of stuffed animals. He bought them by the armful. Small ones, medium ones, even a few oversized gorillas and elephants that he had to awkwardly carry back to the hotel. Just buying gifts for the kids back home. He'd cheerfully tell anyone who gave him a curious look, his arms laden with furry creatures. He quickly realized this approach, while effective for acquiring a steady stream, wasn't going to achieve the overwhelming volume he needed. He needed an army of fluffy recruits, and he needed them fast. That's when the enthusiastic fans idea came back to him. Elvis had a dedicated fan club, and many of them were known for their generosity, often sending gifts to the hotel where he was staying. Red knew a few of the fan club presidents and loyal followers. He began making discreet phone calls. "Hey, Brenda," he'd say to a local fan club leader, his voice low and confidential. "It's Red West. Listen. Elvis has a really big surprise coming up, and we need your help with something special." He explained the need for stuffed animals, carefully omitting the prank aspect and framing it as a surprise decorator for Elvis's room, a way to show him love and comfort on the road. He made it sound like a grand, heartfelt gesture from the fans, which, in a way, it would be Brenda, a devoted fan for years. Didn't hesitate. "Anything for Elvis, Red. How many do you need?" "As many as you can gather, Brenda," Red told her, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Any kind. Big, small, colorful, plain. The more, the merrier." Within hours, the hotel staff started receiving calls about packages being delivered for Red West, rather than Elvis. Fan club members, brimming with enthusiasm, started dropping off bags and boxes filled with stuffed animals at the hotel's bell desk, addressed to Red. Bears, rabbits, cartoon characters, even a few custom-made Elvis plushies began to accumulate. The hotel bellhops, accustomed to the oddities that accompanied Elvis's entourage, simply shrugged and piled the mysterious packages into a discreet storage room that Red had managed to secure. He'd told them it was for a special charity event that Elvis was planning. The collection process became a daily ritual. Red would check the storage room, marveling at the growing mountain of plush. He'd find a giant pink gorilla here, a tiny blue elephant there, a whole family of teddy bears in a shopping bag. Each new addition brought him closer to his goal. He had to be careful, though Elvis was observant. Red made sure to conduct his collection. Missions when Elvis was busy with rehearsals, meetings, or just holed up in his suite watching movies. He always changed out of his stuffed animal collecting clothes before rejoining Elvis, lest any stray fluff give him away. One afternoon, Elvis caught Red coming back from an errand with a suspiciously large, lumpy bag. "What's in the bag there, Red?" Elvis asked, narrowing his eyes playfully. "You trying to smuggle snacks back into your room or what?" Red, ever quick on his feet, feigned exasperation. "It's just some laundry, you know, trying to stay presentable. Not all of us have a team to do everything for us." He gestured to the pristine state of Elvis's own robe. Elvis just chuckled, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "Right, laundry smells a bit like cotton candy in desperation if you ask me." Red forced a laugh, his heart pounding a little. "Close call," he continued his covert operations. He even enlisted Sonny and Lamar to help with the acquisitions, sending them on specific missions to different parts of the city. Joe, ever the strategist, helped manage the logistics of the accumulating plushies, ensuring they remained hidden from Elvis's curious gaze. The storage room was now almost completely full, a veritable zoo of fabric and stuffing. Red would sneak in just to admire his handiwork, imagining the look on Elvis's face. The soft, quiet mass of toys was the complete antithesis of the frantic, slimy frogs. It was comforting, overwhelming, and utterly ridiculous. The quantity was there, the element of surprise was maintained, and now all that remained was the perfect execution. Red had a specific time in mind, time when Elvis would be gone for a significant period, allowing for a full-scale plush invasion. He just needed to wait for the right moment, the perfect window of opportunity to unleash Operation Cuddle Chaos. The week leading up to the grand unveiling of Operation Cuddle Chaos was a master class in clandestine activity. Red West, usually direct and open, found himself adopting the stealth and cunning of a seasoned spy. Every movement was calculated, every conversation guarded. The storage room provided by the hotel was now bursting at the seams. Plush toys of every size, shape, and species spilled from boxes and bags. There were classic teddy bears, fluffy bunnies with long ears, fierce-looking, but surprisingly soft lions, even a few obscure cartoon characters. It looked like a toy factory had exploded in the room. Red's biggest challenge was keeping Elvis completely in the dark. Elvis was intuitive, often picking up on the slightest shift in mood or behavior among his friends. He loved a good secret, but he was also notorious for sniffing them out. "What's with all the whispering, Red?" Elvis asked one afternoon, catching Red and Joe in a hushed conversation about delivery schedules for more plushies. "Just discussing logistics for the next tour leg," Red smoothly replied, giving Joe a subtle nudge to back him up. "You know, hotel bookings, transport, the usual." Elvis narrowed his eyes. "Doesn't sound like the usual. Sounds more like you're planning something fluffy, maybe." He sniffed the air playfully. "I smell pus stuffing," quickly clapped Elvis on the shoulder, laughing a little too loudly. "Nonsense, you're just imagining things. Maybe you've been watching too many cartoon shows." Elvis just chuckled, letting it go for the moment, but Red knew he was walking a fine line. He had to be extra cautious. Their collection methods became more elaborate. Instead of simple trips to souvenir shops, they began sending the younger members of the crew on errands to different parts of town, each with a specific list of plush types and sizes They even put out a call to a few more fan clubs in nearby cities, arranging for overnight deliveries. The hotel staff, bless their hearts, continued to accept the packages without question, storing them diligently in Red's designated charity event room. Red spent hours in that storage room mentally, mapping out how he would deploy the plush army. He envisioned mountains of soft toys strategically placed to maximize the element of surprise and visual impact. The bed would be completely buried, the floor a treacherous landscape of fur, even the bathroom perhaps a rogue stuffed fish in the tub. He also had to manage the expectations of his co-conspirators. Lamar and Sonny were practically vibrating with anticipation. "Are we doing this soon, Red?" Lamar would ask daily, his eyes gleaming. "I'm ready for some serious fluff-flinging." "Patience, my friend." Red would advise, "The timing has to be perfect. Elvis needs to be out of the room for a good solid stretch, enough time for us to turn his suite into a cuddly nightmare." The ideal opportunity arose when Elvis scheduled an all-day recording session at an off-site studio. He'd be gone from early morning until late evening, completely immersed in his music, his phone often turned off to avoid distractions. This was it. Red, Joe, and Sonny meticulously planned their assault. They'd need to coordinate with the hotel's security and cleaning staff to ensure no interruptions. Red arranged for a deep clean of Elvis's room during his absence, which would allow them to gain access without suspicion. Cleaning crew would understand, of course, that the deep clean would involve an unusual amount of soft furnishings. The night before the big day, Red found himself unable to sleep. He lay in bed, replaying the frog incident in his mind, then envisioning Elvis's reaction to the stuffed animals. He knew Elvis would laugh, that was the most important part. Their friendship was built on this kind of playful chaos. It wasn't about malice. It was about shared joy and a deep understanding of each other's sense of humor. He thought back to all the years they'd known each other, from their childhood days in Memphis, through the lean times to the unbelievable heights of fame. Pranks had always been a part of their dynamic, a way to stay grounded, to keep life interesting amidst the constant demands of superstardom. The frogs were Elvis's way of saying, "I'm still that mischievous kid from Memphis, and I love you enough to annoy you." And the stuffed animals would be Red's way of saying, "I know exactly who you are too, and I love you right back." The clock ticked slowly towards morning. Red finally drifted off, dreaming of a sea of plush, of Elvis's bewildered face, and of the inevitable uproarious laughter that would follow. The stage was almost set. The plush army was ready. Tomorrow, the king of rock and roll would walk into a kingdom of fluff. The morning of the big prank dawned bright and clear, but for Red West, the air was thick with the thrilling tension of a secret mission. Elvis had left for his recording session just after breakfast, humming a new melody, completely unaware of the fluffy fate awaiting him. "All right, boys," Red whispered to Joe and Sonny, who stood ready in the hallway outside Elvis's suite. An army of hotel bellhops waiting discreetly with rolling carts piled high with bags of plush. Operation Cuddle Chaos is a go. Remember the plan: speed and silence. The hotel management, having been given a vague but convincing story about a special surprise charity setup for Elvis, had been surprisingly cooperative. They'd even assigned a few extra staff members to help, believing they were assisting a noble cause. The bellhops, with their stoic efficiency, were ideal for moving the sheer volume of stuffed animals without drawing undue attention. Red unlocked Elvis's suite with a master key, the same way Elvis had entered his room for the frog prank. It felt like poetic justice. The suite was quiet, pristine, and entirely unprepared for the invasion. "Let's do this," Joe said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. The doors to the storage room were thrown open, revealing the colossal mountain of stuffed animals. It was even more overwhelming in person than Red had imagined. The bellhops, wide-eyed but professional, began loading the plushies onto their carts, wheeling them down the hall and into Elvis's suite. The first wave of stuffed animals was a trickle, then a stream, then a furry, colorful deluge. Red directed the operation with the precision of a conductor. "Start with the bed," he commanded, pointing to Elvis's king-size bed. "Cover every inch. Make it impossible to find the pillows." Soon, the bed disappeared beneath a mountain of teddy bears, giant gorillas, small plush cats, and a surprising number of stuffed Elvis dolls. They were stacked high, creating a soft, uneven landscape that looked utterly ridiculous. Next, the floor Red wanted it to be like wading through a plush swamp. "Spread them out. Make it dense. No bare patches." The bellhops and Red's crew began scattering stuffed animals across the carpet. Soon walking became a precarious balance act, stepping over and around furry obstacles. The room began to feel smaller, the air filled with the faint scent of new fabric and a hint of dust. "The couch," Sonny called out already, burying the velvet sofa in a cascade of bright pink unicorns and rainbow-colored dragons. Lamar, who had joined them, took particular delight in finding the smallest nooks and crannies. He stuffed a tiny plush mouse into one of Elvis's dress shoes. A miniature elephant found its way into the ice bucket. A fluffy frog, ironically, was placed strategically on the toilet seat. Red personally supervised the grand reveal. He ensured that the first thing Elvis would see upon entering his room was an overwhelming wall of fluff. He positioned a giant grinning teddy bear right by the door, as if to greet the king. The living room, usually spacious and orderly, was transformed into a chaotic yet strangely inviting landscape of cuddly creatures. The dining table was buried under a pile of various plush foods, giant donuts, smiling pizzas, and oversized tacos. The armchairs looked like they were upholstered in fur. Even the bathroom got its share. The counter was covered in small, fluffy animals. The tub became a swimming pool for a family of plush ducks. Elvis's toiletries were artfully arranged around a plump, stuffed badger. Hours passed in a blur of frantic, joyful activity. Sweat beaded on Red's forehead, but he barely noticed. His vision was coming to life. The room was no longer a sterile hotel. Sweet, it was a wonderland of soft, furry chaos. By late afternoon, just before Elvis was due back, the work was complete. Red stepped back, surveying his masterpiece. The room was a monument to plush, a soft, silent riot of color and texture. It was absurd, beautiful, and utterly hilarious. "Perfect, Red," whispered a triumphant smile on his face. "Absolutely perfect." Joe gave a low whistle. "He's going to flip, Red. This is even better than the frogs." "It's the opposite, you see," Red explained, a spark in his eyes. "The frogs were cold, slimy, a little gross. This is soft, cuddly, completely harmless. It's overwhelming with love." They quickly gathered their tools, making sure no trace of their presence remained except for the thousands of silent, waiting sentinels. They straightened their clothes, tried to brush off any stray fur, and slipped out of the suite, locking the door behind them. Red's heart hammered with a mixture of anticipation and pure delight. He couldn't wait to see Elvis's face. He could already picture the scene. Elvis, walking in, tired after a long day of recording, expecting his usual orderly sanctuary only to be met by an avalanche of overwhelming fluff. The revenge was set. Now all they had to do was wait for the king to come home. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the Las Vegas horizon, as Elvis Presley, tired but exhilarated from a long, productive recording session, made his way back to his suite. His mind was still buzzing with new melodies, a new song taking shape in his head. He looked forward to a quiet evening, maybe a good meal, and some rest. He inserted his key card into the lock, the familiar green light flashing. Door swung open and Elvis stepped inside, his hand reaching for the light switch. Then he stopped, dead in his tracks. The room was bathed in the soft, fading light of dusk, but even in the dimness, the sheer volume of stuff was undeniable. His eyes, accustomed to the crisp, clean lines of his hotel suite, struggled to make sense of the new reality. He flicked on the lights. What greeted him was not the familiar expanse of carpet and furniture, but an unreal, overwhelming ocean of plush toys. They were everywhere. The floor was a bumpy, furry landscape of multicolored fabric and stuffing. His king-sized bed had vanished beneath a veritable mountain of teddy bears, smiling lions, and cheerful bunnies. The couch was buried under a fluffy avalanche. Even the lamps had little stuffed animals draped over their shades. Elvis blinked. Once, twice. His jaw slowly dropped. "What in the world?" he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. He took a tentative step forward, his foot sinking into a pile of stuffed pandas and puppies. Pulled his foot back, feeling a strange sensation. Soft, yielding, completely unexpected. He looked down at the furry creatures at his feet. Then slowly his gaze swept across the entire room. A giant plush gorilla sat majestically on his favorite armchair, its button eyes staring straight ahead, a string of tiny, colorful stuffed worms draped across his curtains. On his desk, a parade of miniature elephants marched across his song lyrics. It was so utterly ridiculous, so over the top, so completely unlike anything he could have imagined. His mind raced, trying to process the scene. Was it a prank? Had his fans somehow managed to get in and decorate? Then a flicker of memory. Red's promise. Payback is coming, and it's going to be even funnier. Elvis slowly turned his head towards the bathroom, where a cheerful chorus of stuffed bath toys seemed to be holding court. He saw a fluffy frog perched precariously on the toilet seat, staring at him with unblinking, stitched eyes. The frog. The frog's in Red's room. A slow smile began to spread across Elvis's face, starting as a small twitch at the corner of his lips, then blossoming into a full, wide grin. He looked back at the chaotic, cuddly scene, and the grin turned into a chuckle. The chuckle grew, building in his chest until it erupted into a loud, booming laugh that filled the room. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated delight, of complete and utter amusement. He threw his head back, his rich voice echoing off the walls, a sound of unburdened joy. "R.E.D., he bellowed, still laughing, the name ringing out with affection rather than anger. "You magnificent, crazy son of a gun." Took another step, deliberately sinking his feet into the plush landscape. He bent down, picking up a fluffy, bright yellow duck, examining it with a childlike wonder. "You got me, Red. You absolutely got me." He navigated his way through the stuffed animal maze, stumbling slightly, giggling all the while. He reached the bed, which was now a plush mountain range. Tried to find his pillow, digging through a pile of bears, rabbits, and a surprisingly realistic-looking stuffed rattlesnake. "How am I supposed to sleep in here?" he yelled, still laughing. "It's like a giant cuddle monster swallowed my room." He found a spot on the edge of the bed, clearing away a few plushies, and sat down amidst the fluffy chaos, his shoulders shaking with laughter. He picked up a stuffed Elvis doll, making it dance. Just then, Red, who had been listening from just outside the door with Joe and Sonny, decided it was time for his grand entrance. He pushed open the door and peered inside, trying to maintain a neutral expression. "Everything all right in here, E?" Red asked, feigning concern. Heard some unusual noises. Elvis looked up, his eyes bright with mirth, a goofy grin on his face. He was surrounded by a sea of stuffed animals, a fluffy boa wrapped around his neck. "Unusual noises," Elvis repeated, his voice still thick with laughter. "Red, you didn't just fill my room, you turned it into a freaking toy store," exploded. "How did you even get all these?" Red stepped inside, carefully navigating the plush terrain. "Let's just say I have very resourceful friends and a strong desire for comfortable surroundings." Elvis just shook his head, still laughing. He absolutely knew the frog on the toilet seat was the final brilliant touch. It was a direct, hilarious response to his own prank, turning the tables in the most wonderfully absurd way. "You're a genius, Red," Elvis admitted, picking up a small, fluffy frog and tossing it playfully at Red. "A fluffy, cuddly genius now about getting all this out of here," Red just grinned. "Oh, that's your problem, E. But don't worry, you've got plenty of friends to keep you company tonight." The king of rock and roll was surrounded by an army of plush, and he couldn't have been happier. The revenge was indeed even funnier. The news of Elvis's plush-filled suite spread like wildfire through the Memphis Mafia and the hotel staff. Soon, everyone wanted to see this spectacle. Word travels fast when the king of rock and roll's room has been transformed into a giant furry playpen. One by one, or in small groups, Elvis's friends and crew members started arriving at his door, drawn by the commotion and Elvis's infectious laughter. They peered inside, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock to utter amusement. Lamar Fike, upon seeing the sheer volume of stuffed animals, let out a booming laugh that rivaled Elvis's. "Good Lord, E. It's like a zoo in here. A very, very fluffy zoo." He tried to walk in, immediately stumbling over a giant stuffed dog. Joe Esposito just leaned against the doorframe, a proud smile on his face. "Told you it was genius." Red really outdid himself. Elvis, still sitting amidst the sea of plush, was holding court. He had a giant teddy bear propped up next to him like a royal consort. Pointed out the specific details of Red's prank with glee. "Look, he put a little rabbit in my coffee mug," Elvis exclaimed, pulling out a tiny fluffy bunny. "And check this out, my shower curtain has a whole family of plush squirrels hanging from it." Everyone roared with laughter. It wasn't just the quantity, but the thoughtful placement of the stuffed animals that made it so hilarious. It was clear Red had put genuine effort into every detail. "And the best part," Elvis declared, leaning in conspiratorially, "there's a little frog sitting on the toilet seat, just to remind me who's behind it all." Pointed towards the bathroom, and another wave of laughter swept through the room. Red, basking in the glow of his successful prank, just shrugged modestly. "Just returning the favor. Trying to make your room a little more cozy." "Cozy, Red? I can barely walk in here," Elvis countered, playfully swiping at a nearby stuffed shark. "It's a cuddly obstacle course. I had to dig for 10 minutes just to find my toothbrush." Despite the inconvenience, Elvis was genuinely delighted. He wasn't mad, not in the slightest. His reaction was exactly what Red had hoped for, pure, unadulterated joy. He kept shaking his head, marveling at the ingenuity and scale of the revenge. "So what's the plan, E?" Joe asked, once the initial wave of laughter subsided. "Are we keeping them?" Elvis paused, looking around at the thousands of plush faces staring back at him. He picked up a soft, floppy-eared hound dog. "You know what I think, we keep them for tonight. This is too good. I want to wake up to a room full of fluff." The Memphis Mafia exchanged amused glances. "Only Elvis, but what about tomorrow?" Red prompted. Elvis considered this, then a thoughtful look crossed his face. "You know what these came from the fans, right, Brenda and all them?" Red nodded. "Mostly, yeah, and the rest were bought from local shops." "Well then, we're going to give them back to the fans," Elvis announced. "Not these ones exactly, but we'll arrange a special event. We'll clean all these up, get them packed, and then donate them to local children's hospitals and charities, and we'll make sure the fans know their gifts went to a good cause." A ripple of approval went through the room. That was just like Elvis turning a ridiculous prank into a heartwarming gesture. The night ended with Elvis trying to navigate his plush-infested room, laughing every step of the way. He found it surprisingly difficult to get into bed, but once he did, surrounded by the soft, yielding bodies of the stuffed animals, he found a strange sense of comfort. He even grabbed a few of the smaller ones and arranged them around his pillow. Red watched him, a deep sense of satisfaction warming his chest. This was what their friendship was about. Not just the fame, the music, the lights, but the simple, silly moments, the shared laughter, the unwavering loyalty. The fraud prank had been a moment of chaos. The stuffed animal revenge was a moment of overwhelming, hilarious, and utterly harmless love. It had created a memory that would be retold countless times, a story that would forever encapsulate the unique bond between Elvis Presley and his closest friends. It was more than just a prank. It was a testament to a friendship that could withstand anything, even an invasion of frogs, and respond with an army of fluff. As the last of the stuffed animals were carefully packed away for donation the next morning, the lingering scent of new fabric and the quiet hum of the clean suite remained. Elvis, sitting on his now clear bed, looked at Red West with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Red," Elvis began, a soft smile on his face, "that was a truly brilliant prank, even better than the frogs. I honestly never saw it coming. I aimed for maximum surprise, and maximum fluff. You hit it, Elvis confirmed, nodding slowly. It wasn't just funny because it was unexpected. It was sweet too. Red raised an eyebrow. Sweet? You nearly broke your neck trying to get to the bathroom. Yeah, but it wasn't mean-spirited, was it? Elvis countered. The frogs. They were startling, a little gross. Your revenge. It was just overwhelming, like being buried in kindness. If that makes sense. It did make sense. That was precisely what Red had aimed for. He knew Elvis. He knew that for all his superstar bravado, Elvis had a deep well of empathy and a childlike wonder. Prank that was purely mischievous, without a hint of malice, was the only kind that would truly resonate. I figured after the cold, slimy amphibians, you needed a little warmth, Red said, a hint of a chuckle in his voice. Elvis laughed, a genuine, relaxed sound. You always did know how to get to me, Red. Always knew what I needed even when I didn't know it myself. Their friendship wasn't just about the pranks, of course. It was built on decades of shared history. Red had been there from the beginning. Before the fame, when Elvis was just a kid with big dreams and a guitar. He'd been there through the lean times, the grueling tours, the dizzying heights of superstardom. He'd seen Elvis, at his most vulnerable and at his most magnificent. Red remembered a specific instance from their early touring days before they could afford lavish hotel suites. They were crammed into a tiny motel room, sharing beds, counting pennies. Elvis had just finished a particularly difficult show. Feeling the pressure of being a new rising star, Red had found him sitting on the edge of the bed looking utterly defeated. Instead of offering grand advice, Red had simply gone out and bought Elvis's favorite candy bar and a cheap, goofy-looking plush monkey. From a roadside stand, he tossed them onto Elvis's lap. Elvis, surprised, had looked up, a small smile appearing through his exhaustion. He'd eaten the candy, and then, without a word, he'd actually clutched the monkey. For a moment, a rare, unguarded gesture of comfort. It was a small moment, easily forgotten, amidst the whirlwind of their lives. But it had stuck with Red. It had taught him something fundamental about Elvis, that beneath the swagger and the showmanship, there was a deeply sensitive soul who appreciated genuine affection and playful comfort. It's like you always say, Red said, breaking the silence. Sometimes you just need a good laugh and maybe a few thousand cuddly creatures to remind you that life shouldn't always be so serious. Elvis nodded, a faraway look in his eyes, perhaps remembering similar moments of simple joy. Exactly. That's why I love all you guys. You keep me honest. You keep me from taking myself too seriously. Their friendship was a two-way street of mischief and genuine care. Elvis's frog prank wasn't just about revenge for the hairgel. It was about injecting chaos and fun into their often regimented lives. A reminder that they were still just a bunch of boys from Memphis who loved to mess with each other. And Red's stuffed animal revenge was the perfect echo, a chaotic, over-the-top explosion of softness that encapsulated everything endearing about Elvis and their bond. It showed Red truly knew Elvis's heart. He knew that the King of Cool had a soft spot for animals, for comfort, for innocent fun. He didn't resort to anything damaging or truly embarrassing. He went for the jugular of harmless, overwhelming affection. So I guess the score's even now, huh? Red asked, breaking Elvis's reverie. Elvis chuckled. Even, Red. I think you might be ahead by about 1,000 stuffed animals. But I'll take it. It was worth every single laugh. He paused, then his eyes twinkled. But you know what this means, don't you? You got it, Elvis said, a mischievous grin returning to his face. And I'm already thinking you better sleep with one eye open, Red West, or maybe one nostril open just in case. They both laughed, the sound filling the now orderly room with a warmth that no amount of lavish decor could provide. It was the sound of a friendship, solid and enduring, stitched together with laughter, loyalty, and the occasional utterly ridiculous prank. From that day forward, the fraud prank and the stuffed animal revenge became legendary tales within the inner circle of the Memphis Mafia. They were stories often recounted over late-night poker games, during long drives between tour stops, or whispered backstage before a concert. Each retelling brought fresh waves of laughter, solidifying their place in the shared history of Elvis and his friends. Elvis himself loved to tell the story of the plush invasion, always exaggerating the details for comedic effect. I opened the door, and it was like a giant fuzzy monster jumped out at me, he'd bellow, his arms wide. I couldn't see my bed. I couldn't see the floor. It was just fluff everywhere. Red West, that rascal, he buried me in teddy bears. And Red, with a quiet smile, would usually add, just giving the king some much-needed comfort, after all those cold, slimy frogs you left for me. The memory wasn't just about the humor. It was a powerful reminder of the unique bond they shared. In a world where Elvis was constantly surrounded by adulation, demands, and the pressures of fame, his friends were his anchor. They saw past the king to the mischievous boy from Tupelo, who loved to laugh and play pranks, and he loved them for it. The stuffed animals themselves, after their brief reign in Elvis's suite, found new homes. Just as Elvis had promised, they were cleaned, sorted, and then personally delivered by Red and other members of the crew to children's hospitals, orphanages, and various charities throughout Las Vegas. Each plush toy came with a small card, handwritten by Elvis, wishing the recipient joy and comfort. It was a tangible expression of the heartwarming spirit that had emerged from the playful chaos. For years, whenever Elvis or Red would spot a particularly large or outlandish stuffed animal in a store, they'd wink at each other. Or Elvis would playfully warn, "Don't even think about it, Red." The stuffed animal invasion became their inside joke, a secret handshake of their enduring friendship. Their pranking didn't stop, of course. It was too deeply ingrained in their dynamic. There was always a tacit understanding that the jokes would never cross the line into genuine cruelty or malice. They were always designed to provoke laughter, to surprise, and ultimately to strengthen their bond through shared memorable absurdity. Red West remained a steadfast presence in Elvis's life. A loyal friend, confidant, an occasional co-conspirator. He was there for the highs and the lows, providing the grounded perspective and unwavering support that Elvis so desperately needed. In the end, the story of the frogs and the stuffed animals wasn't just about a prank gone wild. It was a testament to the warmth of human connection, the joy of shared laughter, and the enduring power of friendship. It was a heartwarming reminder that even the biggest stars, surrounded by all the glamour and attention, found their truest comfort and happiness in the simple, playful moments with the people who knew and loved them best. The fraud prank was the spark, the stuffed animal revenge was the brilliant, heartwarming flame, and the unwavering friendship between Elvis Presley and Red West was the eternal glow that lit up their lives.